He was an action hero, a cultural icon, a martial arts legend on the cusp of superstardom.
He was a terrific athlete. He was explosively fast.
He was the Einstein of martial art.
For years, people doubted the stories, thinking they were myths or mere exaggerations. But time and evidence revealed something far greater. Bruce Lee's abilities weren't illusions. They were proof of what discipline and focus can achieve. He wasn't just performing. He was reshaping what people believed was possible. His power, speed, and philosophy continue to inspire generations.
I have several questions. What is the highest technique you hope to achieve?
To have no technique.
Very good. What are your thoughts when facing an opponent?
There is no opponent.
And why is that?
Because the word I does not exist.
Was Bruce Lee really so fast that cameras couldn't even catch him? Could one punch from an inch away truly send a man crashing backward?
In Bruce Lee kick, you don't shut your eyes, because when you shut your eyes, you cannot see Bruce Lee kick.
Join us as we uncover the truth behind Bruce Lee's strength, speed, and lasting impact on martial arts. Bruce Lee, the myth that was real. Before Bruce Lee, martial arts lived in hushed corners, whispered about in dimly lit dojos, respected but misunderstood. Then came a man who moved like lightning, but thought like a philosopher, whose body was both a weapon and canvas. His life blurred the line between cinema and reality. Every story about him sounds like a myth, yet most of it really happened. And the first story that forced belief was the punch that seemed to break physics. Let's dive into the story. In 1964, Long Beach, California, Bruce stood before a packed crowd. A volunteer stepped forward, arms folded. Bruce placed his knuckles an inch from the man's chest. No wind-up, just stillness. Then, in a blur, he struck. The man was blasted backward 6 feet, crashing into a chair. Gasps filled the hall. This wasn't stage magic. It was raw power in an inch. That single strike, later captured in grainy footage, cemented Bruce Lee as something beyond ordinary. Joe Rogan would describe it decades later as like getting hit with a shotgun. Scientists eventually confirmed it. Bruce generated more than 1,500 newtons of force, enough to snap ribs. It wasn't his arm. It was his entire body moving as one, energy traveling from feet to fist in a single wave. The lesson was clear. Power wasn't about size or distance, but efficiency, precision, and control. Bruce shattered centuries of assumptions. Strength, he showed, could live in silence, coiled, invisible, until it erupted. And the punch was only the beginning. Bruce's training mocked human limits. Imagine balancing your body on 2 fingers of each hand, then doing push-ups while holding a conversation. That was his warm-up. He performed them effortlessly, his fingers carrying over 40 pounds each with no tremble. Bob Wall recalled how Bruce discussed philosophy mid-push-up, his mind and body perfectly aligned. Doctors later pointed to his abnormal bone density, thickened tendons, and pain tolerance honed against hard surfaces. His fingers, forged by pressing into sand and steel pellets, could dislocate a man's shoulder with a friendly pat. His strength terrified not because it was brutal, but because it was precise. Then there was his speed. On the set of The Green Hornet in 1966, directors noticed something odd. Bruce would punch, a stuntman would fly backward, but the footage showed nothing. At first, they thought the cameras were broken. The truth, his punches were faster than film could capture. Shooting at 24 frames per second, the camera missed movements completed in less than 1 frame. Producers begged Bruce to slow down. His punch was clocked at 0.05 seconds, faster than most nervous systems could process. Even slowed, his efficiency was obvious. No wasted movement. By Enter the Dragon, Directors had to use multiple cameras and higher frame rates to catch him. Today, UFC fighters still analyze those tapes, frame by frame, searching for secrets. But mastery wasn't just seen in cameras or push-ups. Sometimes, it echoed in breaking bones. In 1960, before fame, Bruce fought Yoichi Nakachi, a Japanese black belt who challenged him in Seattle, accusing him of dishonoring tradition by teaching Westerners. They met in a YMCA handball court. The fight lasted 11 seconds. Nakachi lunged, Bruce slipped, countered, shattered his nose, then fractured his skull with a punch witnesses compared to a coconut splitting. Nakachi collapsed unconscious. Bruce won, but in his journal he didn't celebrate. He grieved. The power he had unleashed frightened him. He realized then that his body wasn't just capable, it was dangerous. That night marked a turning point. He began to obsess over control. He studied not just Wing Chun, but boxing, fencing, wrestling, anything to refine his philosophy of restraint and truth. From that obsession came Jeet Kune Do, not a style but a way of stripping away excess until only what worked remained. Hollywood, however, wasn't ready. Roles for Asians were caricatures, the servant, the comic relief, the exotic sidekick. Bruce was cast as Kato in The Green Hornet, elevating the role with his skill, but still denied a lead. When he pitched The Warrior, about a Chinese martial artist in the American West, it was rejected. A few years later, the same concept appeared on TV as Kung Fu, starring David Carradine, a white actor in yellowface. Bruce was crushed, but unbroken. In his journal, he wrote, "They stole my idea, but they can't steal me." He returned to Hong Kong and rewrote cinema. With The Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon, he didn't just make action films, he created cultural events, stories pulsing with pride, defiance, and awe. Then came Enter the Dragon, a Hollywood-Hong Kong co-production. For the first time, a Chinese man stood as the central hero of a Western blockbuster. The film exploded globally. Tragically, Bruce died weeks before its release. But the legend had already surpassed the man. Decades later, when his private training room in Kowloon Tong was opened, researchers found a vault of obsession. Inside, notebooks coated with training methods, diagrams of muscle and bone, pressure point maps in multiple languages. Machines of his own design, some medieval, others futuristic. At the center, a wooden and metal chamber, a resistance coffin, where Bruce practiced blindfolded, simulating attacks from all sides. Stranger still were tapes, recordings of Bruce narrating his training in calm detail. In one, he spoke of dissolving tension before thought could interfere. The strike is over before the mind catches up. Neuroscientists later concluded his reaction time was as fast as 0.045 seconds, quicker than conscious thought. Bruce had trained himself to act before awareness, his body operating on instinctive perfection. So what was he training for? Not a film, he had already conquered cinema. Not tournaments, he dismissed them as ego-driven. His journals revealed humility, even fear of failure. Perhaps he was chasing something deeper. The purest form of human expression, the union of body and spirit, movement transcending thought. Bruce Lee didn't just fight. He redefined what it meant to move, to think, to live in a body. He proved that limits were illusions, that myths could be made flesh. His punch broke physics, his speed broke the film. His philosophy broke boundaries. And though his life was short, his legend endures, not as fantasy, but as proof that sometimes the impossible is simply waiting for someone bold enough to do it. Let's dive into Bruce Lee's impact in the martial arts industry. The dragon who rewired culture. And when Bruce Lee stepped into Hollywood, he didn't just enter the industry, he invaded it, like water breaking a dam. At a time when Asian actors were cast as comic relief or background shadows, Bruce demanded the camera's center. He didn't bow, shuffle, or caricature his heritage. Instead, he stood upright, eyes blazing, a man who embodied dignity in every frame. Suddenly, the West saw something it had long ignored. An Asian lead who was neither submissive nor silent but magnetic, commanding, and unforgettable. He broke racial and cultural barriers by sheer force of presence. With every glare and movement, he rewrote who could be a hero on screen. But the revolution didn't stop at representation. Bruce didn't just show martial arts, he made it a cinematic language. Before him, fight scenes were brawls, drunken haymakers swinging until someone fell. But when Bruce moved, every kick and punch had rhythm, punctuation, and grammar. He treated martial arts like poetry, turning violence into choreography. Suddenly, fists could tell stories. An exchange wasn't just about winning, it was about communicating a philosophy. Directors and audiences alike realized martial arts weren't circus tricks. They were storytelling tools as powerful as dialogue. So when Bruce designed fight sequences, he laced them with meaning. Look at Way of the Dragon. His showdown with Chuck Norris in the Roman Colosseum wasn't just fists colliding, it was East meeting West. Tradition clashing with brute force, subtlety outthinking raw power. The fight told a narrative without a single word spoken, proving that combat could carry themes as rich as Shakespearean dialogue. From then on, no serious filmmaker could stage a fight without asking, "What story does this duel tell?" Yet Bruce wasn't content with old filming tricks. He moved so fast, so clean, that even upgraded cameras strained to keep pace. Directors scrambled to invent new techniques just to capture him, slow motion to reveal hidden beats, multiple cameras to chase his angles, higher frame rates to stretch time itself. In a way, Bruce forced cinema to evolve technologically. The industry had to catch up to his body. He became the reason action films adopted the visual grammar that now feels normal. Close-ups of strikes, wide shots of footwork, slowed frames of impact. Without him, action cinema might still be staged like clumsy bar fights, all noise and no artistry. And if technology bent to him, philosophy bent with him. Bruce made fight scenes not just spectacular, but spiritual. He wasn't showing off. He was teaching. His movements carried Taoist whispers. Water adapts, emptiness strikes, simplicity triumphs. Every parry, every block wasn't just technique. It was a worldview embodied. When he disarmed an opponent, it felt like wisdom over brute strength. When he struck, it felt like a truth-piercing illusion. Watching him was like attending a sermon where the pulpit was the body and the gospel was movement. So when Enter the Dragon premiered in 1973, the world didn't just see a film, it saw a new standard. The movie blended espionage thrills, Eastern philosophy, and martial artistry into one explosive spectacle. It wasn't just a blockbuster, it was a blueprint. Every martial arts film that followed, from Jackie Chan's comedic stunts to The Matrix's wire few, traced its DNA back to Enter the Dragon. The film showed producers worldwide that audiences craved not just action, but the unique fusion of wisdom and violence that Bruce embodied. And because of Bruce, doors swung open for others. Jackie Chan's acrobatics, Jet Li's precision, Donnie Yen's fluidity, all walked through the gates Bruce kicked down. Even Western stars like Keanu Reeves owe him a debt. The Matrix's fight scenes are pure Bruce Lee philosophy in digital form. His shadow stretched across decades, giving future stars permission to combine depth with spectacle, philosophy with choreography. Without him, the action genre would have stagnated. With him, it became a global phenomenon. Yet it wasn't only actors who bowed to his influence. Modern UFC fighters still pore over Bruce's tapes, dissecting his movements frame by frame. They study his economy of motion, his uncanny timing, his refusal to waste energy. Conor McGregor once admitted he borrowed Bruce's stance. Dana White president of the UFC, has called him the father of mixed martial arts. Fighters who live in cages under floodlights still whisper the name of a man who died before MMA was even born. That's because Bruce wasn't teaching a style. He was teaching adaptability, the very principle the UFC thrives on. And still, his reach stretched beyond sport. Decades after his death, Bruce remains in comic books, video games, music videos, and fashion. His yellow jumpsuit from Game of Death became iconic enough for Tarantino to resurrect it in Kill Bill. Hip-hop legends sampled his interviews. Children wore his face on posters. Entire generations who never saw him alive still feel his presence, as if he haunts pop culture not like a ghost, but like a patron saint of resilience. But the deepest cut came in the West's imagination of heroes. Before Bruce, action stars were musclemen. John Wayne, Charles Bronson, towering figures who fought with grit. Bruce forced Hollywood to see something else. That lean, wiry strength, sharpened by discipline and philosophy, could be even more compelling. He made martial arts not exotic, but essential. Suddenly, a hero didn't need a revolver. A hero could carry empty hands and still feel larger than life. And so, Bruce Lee, the man who died at 32, stretched himself across centuries. He shattered Hollywood stereotypes, turned martial arts into cinema's second language, bent cameras to his will, infused combat with philosophy, set standards with Enter the Dragon, cleared paths for global stars, inspired fighters in cages, imprinted himself on pop culture, and reshaped how heroes looked forever. His legend endures not because of mystery, but because every impossible thing he did was documented, seen, and felt. He didn't need myth to make him immortal. He lived myth until reality bent around him. Let's uncover the mystery behind Bruce Lee's intense training and strength, the hidden depth of his training and philosophy. Bruce Lee wasn't stockpiling trophies or costumes. He was building a laboratory for the human spirit. Every page of those notebooks looked like a scientist's field journal mixed with a philosopher's diary. Some entries mapped out pressure points in red ink. Others described how to use stillness as a weapon. It was as if Bruce was trying to reverse engineer the body the same way Edison dissected electricity. But the notebooks were only half the revelation. His training equipment told another story altogether. Hanging from the walls were devices nobody had seen before, pulley-weighted striking arms that snapped back like living opponents, heavy bags stuffed not with sand but with metal shot, wooden dummies reinforced with steel joints. One piece looked like a torture rack from medieval Europe. Another resembled the skeleton of a futuristic exosuit. They weren't props for films. They were prototypes for testing the body under stresses no traditional dojo had ever imagined. Bruce wasn't content with Wing Chun drills or standard gym routines. He was inventing his own machines, his own battlefield. The contraption surrounded the user on all sides with elastic cords and spring-loaded arms. Inside, you couldn't punch without resistance pulling back, couldn't step without cords dragging your legs, couldn't breathe without feeling confined. Bruce trained in it blindfolded. He was simulating attacks from every direction, forcing his body to respond without sight, without preparation, without hesitation. It was combat distilled into instinct. Yet even the chamber wasn't the strangest part. Hidden among the piles of reels were audio tapes, Bruce narrating his own training. In one recording, you can hear him striking pads, the thuds echoing like gunshots. Between breaths, he mutters instructions to himself. Exhale before contact. Dissolve tension. Let the strike finish before the thought begins. It wasn't the voice of a man performing. It was the voice of a man experimenting with himself, like clay in the hands of a sculptor. He wasn't teaching an audience. He was teaching his future self. By the time Lee's brain registered a stimulus, his body had already responded. It meant he had effectively bypassed the normal chain of human processing, training his nervous system to act as if thought and action were the same. In combat, that made him untouchable. But here's where the myth collides with something more human. For all the awe those tapes inspired, his journals told a quieter story. Between sketches of muscles and lists of drills were confessions of doubt. "Am I enough?" one entry asked. "Fear is the enemy within." Another page read, "I must keep improving, or I will become nothing." He didn't see himself as a demigod. He saw himself as a student standing on the edge of failure every day. Behind the image of invincibility was a man terrified of stagnation. So why push so far? Why build chambers, design alien-looking equipment, and code his notes like military secrets? Some say he was preparing for films, for roles that would demand feats no actor had performed before. Others argue he was testing Jeet Kune Do, stress-proofing his new philosophy against every scenario. But many close to him believe the truth was deeper. Bruce wasn't training for a fight at all. He was training for expression. He wanted to move the way a painter paints, the way a poet writes, without resistance, without thought, with total honesty and motion. And when you listen to those tapes, you realize he wasn't chasing strength in the traditional sense. He was chasing purity. Dissolving tension wasn't about hitting harder. It was about removing the gap between intention and action. If fear creates hesitation, and hesitation creates failure, Bruce was training to live without hesitation. To exist in a state where body, mind, and spirit weren't three parts, but one fluid force. That wasn't just martial arts. That was philosophy made flesh. Yet this pursuit of purity came with its costs. Friends recalled him emerging from the chamber drenched, trembling, sometimes too weak to stand. His forearms swelled from weeks of gripping modified dumbbells shaped like stone blocks. His fingers bled from fingertip push-ups on gravel. He drove himself past exhaustion not out of vanity, but out of obsession. Because he believed the moment you stopped pushing was the moment you started decaying. That urgency, borderline desperation was what made him unstoppable, but also what burned his body like a candle lit at both ends. And still, he never spoke of this hidden training publicly. He taught students drills, sparred in gyms, and demonstrated speed for television. But the notebooks, the chamber, the coded diagrams, those stayed locked behind the Kowloon Tong door. To outsiders, Bruce Lee was already superhuman. To himself, he was still unfinished. He didn't want the world to see an incomplete sketch when he was trying to paint a masterpiece. So when Linda Lee finally opened that room, decades later, it wasn't just about satisfying curiosity. It was about revealing a man's private war with his own limits. Fans saw the legend. Linda saw her husband's restless pursuit of perfection. One scholar put it best. He wasn't training for combat. He was training for transcendence. Bruce wanted to prove that the human body wasn't bound by the rules we thought it was. He wanted to show that instinct could be faster than thought, that strength could exist without bulk, that humility could coexist with power. And maybe that's why his legacy still feels unfinished. We saw the movies, the interviews, the dazzling fights. But in that hidden room lay a different Bruce Lee, an inventor, a scientist, a philosopher with bruised knuckles and a tape recorder, whispering instructions to a future he wouldn't live to see. Some believe if he had survived, he would have unveiled an entirely new system of human training, something beyond Jeet Kune Do, beyond martial arts, perhaps even beyond sport itself. But death sealed the room before he could. What remains are fragments, coded notebooks, strange machines, and haunting tapes where his voice insists on dissolving tension, on striking before thought. It's enough to convince anyone that Bruce Lee wasn't preparing for fights, films, or fame. He was preparing for a form of human expression so pure, so unfiltered, that it still feels alien today. And that, perhaps, was the truest fight of all. The fight to become not just a martial artist, but a vessel of possibility. What do you think about Bruce Lee's life? Do you think he built a lasting legacy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Also, click on the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it.